many, many women have a tremendous amount of shame around this. They feel that they should be farther along in their businesses. They feel like they should be farther along in their lives. This is that underlying consciousness of not enough that I want to have more women heal. Because when we heal that as a woman, when we actually allow ourselves to receive support, we learn to love and accept ourselves, we have a much fuller well to share with others.
Welcome back to another episode of The Rooted Founder. I'm looking forward to this soulful, reflective, inspirational, transformational conversation today with Laura. She has over 35 years of experience in business strategy, philanthropy, personal growth in multiple industries. And this conversation is not going to be just about her resume, although she's achieved a lot and done some amazing things, but it's going to be talking to the female entrepreneur who wants to build their business differently, maybe experience some crisis, some trauma, some things that have been hurdles or blocks along your path, and you're tired of sacrificing your health, your dinner table, your embodiment, feeling like you're aligned or able to listen to your intuition. That's what this conversation is going to be. So, Laura, I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Staci. I so appreciate the invitation, and I'm excited to have the conversation with you today.
So to start off, I'd love to talk about what you're passionate about, but from a very different angle.
Okay.
So if at the end of your life, you've achieved everything you wanted to achieve, what do you most want to be known for?
I think that this answer might surprise you. I feel like the most important work I've ever had the opportunity to be faced with is to be a mother. And so to be the mother of my children who are now adults, and to know that I did the best I could to really be good stewards of their futures, because they really are the greatest legacy I believe I will leave on the planet. All the work that we do around impact and philanthropy and giving back and empowering causes to lift up children and women globally is fantastic work. And I feel incredibly privileged and grateful to be in a season of life after having built 9 companies and selling 6 of them, to be in a season of life where I get to do what I want to do. There's a lot of conversation that you and I can have about what that is all about from a business perspective. But if you were really to ask me at the heart of what is the most important impact I feel like I can leave as a human being, it's to be a good steward of my children's future.
That's beautiful. And I think I can echo that as well, because my father's a successful entrepreneur, and my mother, she passed away at 59 years old in 2019. And I believe she left such an amazing legacy. My father's still alive, but the memories and the traditions and bringing people together around the dinner table and caring about us with a heart of kindness and compassion and all of that it's a beautiful legacy, because it's something that I get to do as well now.
Yeah, well, think about what a gorgeous leader you are. And I mean, you're gorgeous on the outside and you're gorgeous on the inside. You're choosing to use your voice to create change and impact in the world. It's one of the reasons that I was so magnetized to you. I feel like you are one of the leaders of the next generation, the emerging generation, Staci. So choosing to use your voice and go on a limb, even after you've had remarkable success in several different industries, what you've done with real estate and investing and the things that you've done with building businesses and scaling, you have so much wisdom for someone so young. And so I would echo that. I'm 58 years old, so I'm not that much younger than your mama was when she passed. And, time is precious. Time is so precious. So I know that she is smiling down on you and just so very grateful for who you be in the world, is really such a testament to her work in the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that you want to leave that legacy. And I think another integration piece for it is helping other women do that by also building businesses. Because part of what you're leaving as a legacy is not just the compassion and kindness for your children, but also who you are as a leader, what you're modeling, what you're doing. So I'm curious, in your entire business journey, and your journey of transformation, was there ever a truth or core belief that you had to let go of, even if it felt like giving up a piece of yourself to move forward? How did that impact your path?
Okay, well, how much time do we have? Because 35 years, your entire life, I've been an entrepreneur. So how much do I get to give up every single day is probably a different question, right? And so I'll use this since we're starting down kind of the path of being a mama, is that I feel like when I became divorced with my first husband, which I was 100% my responsibility. He's a great guy. Let's just make that a short, pin in that version of that story. But I will tell you that I became very aware of how precious my time was with my children. And yet I was running around all the time with, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. So one of the most significant game changing, like life changing, paradigm shifting experiences for me was when I got clear about my time. And my time being the great equalizer. And what I mean by that is that we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So wherever you are admiring a human who's a leader in the world, whether they be in politics, whether they be a celebrity, whether they be a star athlete like you and I were talking about earlier, they have the same 24 hours too. So what are they doing that's a little bit different? And what I had to realize when I became a single mama was that the time that I had with my children was cut short. I had less time with them. I couldn't take it for granted anymore. And so in Stop the Spinning, thank you for sharing with me that you read that, the first chapter is the power of 1 minute. And one of the paradigm shifts for me around boundaries and balance and making priorities was to often have this exercise that I do with myself, Staci, where I just pause for 1 minute. It's kind of like when I was running here to get in the call with you today, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to breathe?" I was like, "Yes, I would like to breathe. I'd like to have 1 minute." It's amazing how 60 seconds can be a visceral reset, right? Like really your nervous system, everything can reset in a very short period of time, but it's recognizing the preciousness of that. So I'd say that was probably one of the most catalytic, life-changing things I had to let go of, was running around saying, I don't have time. I was trying to make myself busy and important, but I wasn't doing anybody any favors.
I relate to this so much. And I watch so many business owners and entrepreneurs do this. And we create a codependency with our to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Like our significance and our value is based on our to-do list. And so the more we run around and the more we do, the more significant we feel. And then we wake up one day and we're like, this doesn't feel like I thought it would. I don't feel good. I'm so disconnected from myself. I'm disconnected from my family. No amount of money in the world is going to get me back in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that experience in your business as well?
I think, it's very interesting. There's a different distinction I have in my brain about being self-employed versus being a business owner. And what I mean by that, and because, my audience, my brand, which started with Powered with Passion and Passion, Purpose, Profits, has grown into Limitless Women, is my 9th company. Prior to this, I had 8 companies where you never saw my face. You had no idea who I was, right? So we built real estate companies. We built restaurants. We built retail operations. Nobody knew who I was. I was not a public person. I was very happy with that, hiding out in the middle of Cornville, 2 miles down the dirt road. I was very happy in Sedona. So Cornville's a suburb of Sedona, by the way, in case anybody asks.
I love Sedona.
Yeah. Well, we lived there for 17 years. It's where I raised my children. And so my first husband and I moved there. We got divorced. And then I remarried Scott, who I've been with now for 25 years. 10 weeks after our first date, we got married. So here we are. Proof is in the pudding that the work is really worth the work as far as relationships. And so every day there's something for me to let go of. Still today at 58. The piece around embodiment had to become a learned practice. And I can tell you that as a young girl, I grew up with a desire to be seen and to be popular in a pretty dysfunctional, I would say I had a hard childhood by American standards, right, Staci? So if you read my book, you'll understand that piece around sexual abuse and violence and drugs. That stuff was tough. I'm not trying to poo-poo that experience, but I learned to disassociate from my body and I had to come back to it. And why I say but is that now that we've been doing work all over the world, what I've seen in South America and Africa, in Asia, is how it is for women who don't have access to education, who don't have access to clean water, who don't have access to basic medical care or sanitation. So that's put a different spin on my own childhood as a mature person, right? But the practices, to put a caboose on the train, the practices for me that were so healing around embodiment came through my walk of faith. They came through yoga. Believe it or not, I couldn't do yoga until I was 40. I would go and it was so painful. And I was like, oh, this is a horrible experience. And then I got the right teacher and I slowed down enough to really be able to receive and to be taught. And it's been a beautiful gift in my life. It really has.
How have you brought your embodiment into your business?
I think that it is related to self-care in some ways. I get asked about this quite a bit, believe it or not. And how do you, it's still that conversation. You probably get this too, because you're out there doing the things that other people say can't be done often, right? You and I share that. So often people say, how is it possible that you take care of yourself, that you have a healthy relationship, that you are good with your kids? People always want to know, how do you do that and build a business? And I think that it is not an either or an and conversation. I think it's a part of building a great business to be really focused on what it requires for us as leaders to be present. I can't be present if I didn't have any sleep, right? I was complaining about my puppy last night. He's not a puppy, he's 8 years old, but we treat him like a puppy. This is part of the problem. He was having puppy anxiety last night. This is the problem. We have no grandkids, so he's very spoiled. So, we can look at sleep, we can look at movement, we can look at fuel. I'll tell you, for me, again, this practice of letting go really is a bigger conversation than I think people are aware of until they need to be aware of it, right? So it's almost like the wake-up calls. And we talked about you losing your mama. And, I've referred back a little bit to my divorce. I think that there's things that happen for us in life. There are wake-up calls, right? I talk about that and Stop the Spinning. Whether it's a death, a divorce, a disease, there's something that has us pause, and often it's the body. So it's often the body. I say in my own experience, I was arrogantly healthy, and I take care of myself. So I don't mean that when I say arrogantly healthy, but I assumed that I would continue to have perfect health for 54 years. It never occurred to me that I would have a health issue until I was in a head-on collision. And it was a new wake-up call. And so I said, Lord, I thought I was already awake. What else you got? You know what I mean? What else would you have me know? And that took me on a journey of the next 2 years, where I had 4 surgeries. I had spinal fusion. It was really a fascinating journey. And the pause had me have a new level of gratitude for the body. The body carries the spirit. So without the body, what would we be?
So I think a lot of women, if we're speaking to the female entrepreneur, a lot of women struggle with this. Mm-hmm. And especially in a society that has reinforced this working 24/7, 7 days a week. And if you're not working, you have your automation working for you, and you're just constantly wanting to do things. I totally agree with the wake-up call. You hit this moment in your life that is enough. I can't keep operating like this. I have to do something different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that talk about, hey, don't wait for the wake-up call. Do it soon.
Yeah. We're on this call. That's why we're doing this today, right? We're hey, right. Yeah.
That's still a struggle, though, because there's some lens that we have prior to the wake-up call that almost blinds us from seeing it.
100%.
But what are some things that you think a female entrepreneur could do to prepare? Not prepare for the wake-up call, but prepare themselves inside of their business, inside of themselves, inside of their family, to be in a position to become more integrated and surrender to the process of letting go and also doing their part.
Yeah, I can only say how it is for me, and I'd love to know how it is for you because you've had your own series of wake up calls over the last few years, right? There was COVID and then there was all this stuff. And you are like many of my girlfriends, it was like a one after another, kind of this pile that actually, and I think for some of us, because we are high achievers and because we do move so fast, it's like God tries to get our attention and we're not really paying attention. So sometimes we need a few more things to really get us to pay attention, right? So I'm like, please show me, show me. The integration of your self-care, and I mean on every level, right? Because self-care is more than the physical body. It's the emotional body. It's the spiritual body. I love how you often refer to what's happening at the dinner table. I think that is that's a representation, Staci, of your commitment to a practice. You also referred to your calendar, right? And I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of to-do list. I realize that like many women would like think I'm a little bit crazy, and who am I to say that? But I will tell you that one of the things that I am really clear about is that if I'm going to commit to doing something, I write it in my calendar, not on another piece of paper for me to have one more thing to follow. My calendar is like a living, breathing business partner for me. So what starts on my calendar is, what does that look like in the morning, whether I'm going to a yoga class, whether I'm doing Pilates, whether I'm walking the dogs. I mean, I can tell you this. If I'm going to go to the dentist, where is that on the calendar? I often don't start my workday. We're having this call right now at 2:30 if I've got the time zones, because it's just, 2:30 because it was just daylight savings time. I do all those things in the morning that take care of what I value most: my body, my family, my relationship with God, what's happening with my own protection and stewardship of my goodness, my wealth, my well-being. How do I take care of those things first before I put myself into a situation where I'm in service to somebody else? Because I believe there's a lot of truth in this. You can't give from an empty well. And we can hear all these cute little acronyms and sayings, but the reality is that when we're feeling depleted, when we're running on empty, we're just not giving our best. And what would be the point? You don't want to just show up with a little bit of you. You want to show up with a lot of you, which is why I asked, who is this audience? Is your audience people like you and I that really love living a fully expressed life and recognize the blessing of that? And you said, oh yes, only high achievers. I was like, okay, great. Triple A's of the world. Let's go. No type A's, only triple A's. Yeah. So I'd say that the practice is a discipline, and the discipline is not sexy. But I don't know one high achieving person in any capacity who isn't disciplined about their practice. We went to Acapulco last week, and we were watching I'd never been there before. And we were watching the guys dive off the cliff, right? And I watched them climb up. And I'm going to do this as a social media post because I haven't done it yet, but I've got it in my phone. So they're climbing up, and I'm watching that, and I'm thinking, and they're doing all these gorgeous acrobats, and I'm thinking about how many times did they jump off that cliff? How many times did they jump off with like their feet first, scared? I mean, how many times did they like try to do a sideways? All these things, right? And there was a gentleman in the back who, this may be before your time, but did you ever hear about Timex watches?
No.
Okay. Anybody who's like old enough to remember, everybody used to have a watch. It was a Timex. Before I have a Fitbit now, and I put it in the other room, right? But normally now. So you've got your Apple watches. So back in the day, Timex watches, and their commercial was, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. And if I did want to be rude, because we're on a show, I would get off right now and look at the picture I took. But I want to tell you, this guy who was like on, I don't know, Guinness World Book of Records, something fantastic, and ABC Wide World of Sports back in the day when people used to watch TV like that. It's like the Olympics of what he was doing. He had dove like 37,000 times with this Timex watch on, and it was still ticking. And it was so cool, right? So I think about what is that for us? Life is, whether we go, my husband had emergency open heart surgery. So it takes me a minute, when he was 56 and was diagnosed terminal at that point. And we don't know. I mean, here we are 7 years later, for the grace of God, we're still here. But, I sat in a surgery waiting room and had the doctor look at me and say, he's going to die tonight, or he's going to die this weekend. I don't know how long it's going to take him, but you can take him home. And I'm like, he's not dead yet. Why would I take him home? I got a way better shot keeping him alive in the hospital. I said, what else do you have? And he said, I don't have anything, and I'm the best. It was kind of like one of those moments with a man, right? And I'm not trying to be a man hater. I'm just saying he was like pretty arrogant in not a nice way. And I said, well, who else do you have? I think that's a great business distinction that I want to bring forward as a woman who's been an entrepreneur for decades. I certainly don't have it all figured out, but I can tell you that allowing ourselves to be supported, asking for who else or what else is really a different tenet of leadership than I've got this diagnosis and I've got to go home and go.
I can take this so many different directions because I remember when my mom was diagnosed and it's stage 4 cancer, and it's in another one of those wake up calls. It just puts life in perspective. It puts time in perspective. It puts your priorities. It reshuffles your priorities. And then I love what you said at the end about asking for help. And I think this is something that I've noticed in a lot of entrepreneurs is we're very good at solving problems and we struggle to receive.
Yeah.
And I've definitely noticed that in my own life. It's almost like I'd rather be the one solving and doing so that I don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah.
How has that shown up in your life or your own journey? Switching from being the independent to being in receivership at all?
Well, I would not have a 25-year marriage. I can tell you that if I didn't allow my guy to do for me. I mean, if I learned one thing by messing up my first marriage, it was to pause and allow my man to care for me, so that I could care for him. There's a dance in giving and receiving. Giving can't happen without receiving. Receiving can't happen without giving, right? So it creates a perfect circle. And we have a whole business built on the concept that giving causes growing. It's when we give and we stretch that we are expanded. So when someone wants to give to us, we want to be kind and generous by receiving. I had a good friend who told me back almost 10 years ago, Star Aladdin, said to me, she said, do you know that receiving is a form of giving? And it completely went over my head, Staci. I was like, what? It took me a minute to grasp it. She said, when you come here, I was in a women's mastermind at the time and with a bunch of high achieving women, she said, you come here and you give and give and give to all of us. But when we say, hey, here's a resource, here's something for you, you're always like, I've got it. So it was very too cool for school, right? I had it all figured out. And what was costing me is connection. It was costing me expansion. It was costing me capacity. I was limiting my own capacity by not allowing myself to be in partnership. So a great business is only built when it's built by a collective of talent, right? It's not, I don't think anyone builds a hugely impactful company as a solopreneur. I think a business that's actually founder independent, and here we are talking about the rooted founder. One of the most generous things we can do as founders is think about how do we build a business that will run without us, that will provide service to others, that will provide impact in the world long after we're gone. That's a good business. That's a good legacy for your working hours.
I feel like everyone should go back and rewind that part and listen to it again, especially high achieving women, right? We have this boss babe, ambitious woman, independent woman. And to your point, it is creating division because giving and receiving is a dance. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I give to somebody and they receive, it blesses me.
Yeah, so sweet. So sweet. Well, I just read something that, do you know Gary Vaynerchuk? Do you know of him or do you know him by any chance? I don't know him personally, but I love his work and he's just so bold. But I saw something that he wrote, I want to say maybe on LinkedIn recently or a video that I saw, and he was talking about team development. And he was saying, why are you making your team members wrong for not being you? I mean, you surround yourself with people who have different skill sets. So I'm often in the journey, if you will, as a founder of how do I put the right people in the right positions, right? And often I have the right person in the wrong position. It doesn't mean that they're the wrong person. It means that they're the right person in the wrong position. So really recognizing each of our strengths. I think that's also, because I'm a faith-based person, for me, that's my quiet time. That's my prayer and meditation. That's my conversation with God to say, how would you have me serve today? What would you have me bring today? What's mine and what's not mine? The L in self-care for us, we have an acronym about it, is letting go. What is there for me to let go that's not really mine? How can I just be an advocate, a support for others, and bring what's mine, but also have healthy boundaries about things that are not mine? Yes, I hope that helps.
It's so beautiful. I didn't know we were going to go here, but I'd like to just take a pause and talk about your event that you're coming up in January, because I'm going to be there and I'm excited to be there with you for several days. Can you share, when you said the L in self-care, it made me think of, as a business owner, we were talking before we started recording about how it's hard to turn it off.
Yeah.
Some people find it easier to turn it off than others. And I like to think of that, a visual as like tabs in my brain that are open. And I learned how to close the tabs in my brain so I can shut it down. And so when you talked about L, I was thinking, do you have practices that you do where you shut down and it's like a ritual for you?
It is, and it's so inappropriate, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So,
do tell, please.
well, one of the things, let me give a tiny bit of context and not be such a girl and give you like my whole life story, right? But I say that in all love and respect for being a woman, but often we want to tell you the whole story, and you just asked a question, right? So, so the practice is at 5:00. The practice is with my husband and Jim Cramer. So, do you know who Jim Cramer is?
Yes.
Not the person you would think you'd be hanging out with to calm down for the day. Jim Cramer, for anybody who doesn't know, is the host of Mad Money on CNBC. And I happen to be a high achiever who's married to a high achiever. So when my beloved retired this past time, which I think is probably his last time, he's retired in the past and started another company. I think this time he's really complete with his work life. He sees his opportunity to provide for us, and my kids are grown, right? But provide for me, provide for our family by really paying attention to his investments. And so he watches, Cramer every day at 5:00. And part of what's important in our marriage is me stopping at 5, turning off the computer, sitting with him, usually with a glass of wine, which is the inappropriate part. But, I always say we follow our passions. I used to own a winery. People want to know why. I'm like, oh, I love wine. It wasn't that difficult, right? So, so I sit down with him, have a glass of wine, watch Jim Cramer, talk about the day, talk about our investments, talk about what we're doing next. And it's just that hour before we eat together, before we sit down and eat together. It's like my brain is sifting. It's still moving fast because he's a fast talker. And I'm talking about business, but I'm actually moving myself away from other people's desires for me and moving strictly into my partnership with my beloved. And it's precious. I mean, I have goosebumps saying this to you. It's precious time for me right now to be with him. It's not easy for me because I really love my work. And it's difficult for me sometimes to turn it off at 5. But I know that little bridge takes us to the evening, and then we watch movies, we go, for a walk, we go hear music, we cook together. I mean, we have our evening time together, but there is actually a practice that happens. Thank you, Jim Cramer. Yeah.
So around a lot of female entrepreneurs whose spouses are also entrepreneurs. So very similar to you and your husband. And it's a very common thing to just have this interesting dance of like, how do we both achieve and how do we both give and receive? And what are rituals that actually can work for our relationship to keep us in collaboration and not competition? Because two high achievers can get into competition sometimes.
100%. It's not easy.
Yeah. So 25-year marriage.
Yep.
What would be your one piece of advice aside from the 5 p.m. Kramer and wine?
Well, you asked. This is one of the blessings of being an older person is you just just tell it like it is, right?
Yes, I love it.
I'm not trying to look good anymore. Well, I did curl my hair, tried to put a little makeup on. I would say that it was really tough, Staci, in the early years. I don't know how long you and your beloved have been together, but the first few years were very difficult because we were like two racehorses, right? Like racing. And there was some competition there. And it wasn't, we came together in the collective what helped us is that I had 2 children from my first marriage. He had a son from his first marriage. So we immediately had a blended family, and we made that our priority. We made that our focus, was what was happening with our children, what was happening with our unit as a family, right? So everything else around what was happening with business. And we've owned a lot of different businesses at this point with each other. The other thing that I would say, so first was our values, priorities, right? The second piece I would say is that we early on figured out who did what roles. It's almost like when we teach people, I know this because you teach people to scale all the time, how important it is with roles, responsibilities, requirements, job description, organization charts. I mean, if you think about that in your own relationships, who does what, and how do we, again, acknowledge that, be grateful for that. My guy is cooking, he's doing laundry. I am loving life. I have other strengths. I have things that I do for him. You know what I'm saying? But that recognition early on, when we owned our winery, we owned our tasting room, he was the front of the house, right? So he was the person that customers saw. We had a tasting room that was open 7 days a week. All of our Yelp reviews were about Oliver, our dog, because he would take his dog to work with him because he loved his dog. That kind of thing. So most people did not know who I was. I always say he was the beauty. I was the brains, right? I was the person behind, and he's very smart. So I don't try to sound condescending, but I'm taxes, I'm organization, I'm admin, right? So that's how that business worked. When I started being asked to speak and lead in this capacity, it was really tough for us. 2012, we were sitting on our deck in Cornville, outside in the country in Sedona, and he was in tears. And we've been married 12 years at that point. And he said, I feel like I'm losing you. I don't understand why you need to go. I don't understand who these people are. They're asking, what is it that you want to build this business all around giving away all of our money? It makes no sense to me. And I said, I can't explain a lot of it. And he said, we need counseling. We need help. And we did. We went to therapy again. We'd gone to therapy, obviously, because we got married really quickly. We needed a lot of help in the first few years. We went back to counseling to really reevaluate what were our goals as a couple. We got married on January 1st. So we have kind of a cool ritual around that too, is that every January 1st, we renew our vows. We have a day where we turn everything off, including our children, and just be with each other and talk about, the celebration of what we've experienced so far, what we'd like to do together in the upcoming year, what's important to us. In Scott's prayer, this is going to make me cry a little bit, but Scott's prayer, whether we're having blessing over dinner or we're having these deep conversations, is often the same. He often will say, I just would like more of the same. And I just don't know how many people get to experience the fullness of that, Staci. I just like more of the same is really a precious prayer of gratitude that we really live into, we aspire to live into every day.
It's so beautiful. And I feel like there's been a lot of relationships that have gone through struggle lately, mine included. And it being this trying to figure out that dance, right? Of ambition versus home life versus what needs really are. There was this post that went out of a woman talking about, especially now that women are making more of their own money, men have historically prided themselves on being the financial provider.
Yeah, that feels good. Yeah, it's part of the way they're conditioned.
Right. And now a lot of women are making more money than their significant others.
Right.
And men are struggling with it. And I think the women in a way are struggling with it too, because they're looking for more emotional providership now than financial providership.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if your relationship has gone through an evolution like that. And what words of wisdom you might have for relationships that are making transitions like that.
So I want to go back to what you started with about flow, about the event that we have in January. This is the last time that we're planning to do this in person, which is kind of important because we do other events around legacy and leadership. But this particular one is we're moving to an online focus after this year. So I'll tell you what's special about this is that when a woman disconnects from all of her shoulds and her have-tos and her daily routines and the pressures. There's something magical about what happens when she gives herself space. We have to create space. When I published that first book and it was on Amazon, was called Create Space, I was like, what a funky name. I couldn't get it. Now, fast forward 12 years later, I really get it, right? We have to create space. So to answer your question, what happens when women convene, when we come together in a shared experience of lifting one another up. And literally our whole company is based on giving first, right? We're a philanthropy first organization. I just don't attract anybody that's not interested in that conversation. It's not that there won't be some comparison or feeling like a little competition sometimes of like, I wish I was farther along. Women do that to themselves, but there's this generosity of spirit and heart when you are with other women and allowing yourself to be seen. And I can tell you that because I, as a function of my childhood, right? I mean, anybody wants to read my book can read my book, but I'll tell you the function of that. I didn't feel like the world was safe. I was conditioned to believe that the world was not a safe place. I was conditioned not to trust anyone. I didn't really have girlfriends. One of my very first homework assignments when I did go to counseling as a young woman was to build girlfriend relationships because I had no girlfriends. And I think that is a learned, I had unfortunately been conditioned incorrectly. What's very natural for women is to tend and befriend each other. So getting out of if we want to call it the hamster wheel, getting off the hamster wheel, getting out of the rat race, getting out of that piece, it's very healing for women to come together and be with one another. Now, the right men, meaning that men who feel confident and strong in themselves and their self-esteem has been fully nourished. I use my son as an example. His incredible self-esteem. He is the most fun man to hang out with in the world because he loves himself and he loves women. He's not threatened by any of that, right? So he sees his role, he sees who he is, and at the same time, he cannot do enough or say enough to make another person, male or female, feel amazing. So he's in medical school right now. He's going to be an incredible doctor. I'm so proud of him. So for your own experience, how to do that, I would invite you to look at a few things. I mean, I personally, again, as a person who's a believer, a person of faith, I believe that having our relationships with God, with spirit, with source, with something that is greater than ourselves is an important thing not to poo-poo. Where does that happen in your life? And for a lot of women who don't identify as religious or they've had some church hurt, they've been hurt by experiences, often we'll find that in nature. Just getting out and being someplace where they can connect with the divine and the goodness of the world, right? I mean, the goodness that there is. I think that being with other girls and other women doesn't have to be in a collective. We have our retreats because we know that what happens is when a group of women come together and everyone is interested in giving and we're safe to receive, my goodness, what can we create, right? And flow as a concept is around financial literacy, which I will say, you're very literate financially. You're very intelligent. You've been well educated and you've done your own education. And many, many women have a tremendous amount of shame around this. They feel that they should be farther along in their businesses. They feel like they should be farther along in their lives. This is that underlying consciousness of not enough that I want to have more women heal. Because when we heal that as a woman, when we actually allow ourselves to receive support, we learn to love and accept ourselves. We have a much fuller well to share with others, right? So practicing being with other women is an important practice. Practicing being with the divine, however that shows up for you, and practicing having strong, healthy boundaries about what you said, turning it off. It's the end of the day. It will be there tomorrow. I promise you. All that stuff will be there. You'll get there. You'll get there one step at a time. But what's more important is what's happening around the dinner table. I love how you refer to that again and again.
I love space. And in this world, we're constantly on screens. We're running from one Zoom meeting to the next or one speaking engagement to the next. Not having that space can turn us into more of a robotic human being. And I have found there was a season of my life for 6 months that I took off.
Good. Awesome.
And it was beautiful. Having that space lets you really reconnect. And I walk the beach every day and being in nature. And, I'm faith oriented like you are. And having that time of just solitude and surrender and not taking my worries as mine to solve, but looking for divine guidance to bring solutions to me has helped so much. And realigning in faith with my significant other has also helped a
Yeah,
lot.
it's made a big difference for our marriage. It really has. I think, we've been much more, we've been blessed for a long time, but I can tell you that when we really brought God and gratitude into our daily practices, like just having a blessing, right? And having those conversations, attending church that feels right for us, right? And also just thinking about how many places that we've been touched and more reverence and gratitude for that. It's like a thing that magnifies. I'm not saying that you give to get. I'm just saying that it's the more that we give our challenges to God, the more we allow ourselves to be supported, the greater our experience has become as a family. I do think that there's something also, Staci, to say about this, which is the practice of being on camera and being on screens all the time is your choice. You don't have to do this. And I don't. In fact, I do calls. I don't, as you know, because I've had calls before. I love you, and I'm here I got dressed and put on clothes and came to Zoom for you. But honestly, I don't do. I have team all over the world, and so when I work with them, I'll get on Zoom so that we can see each other. But that's not how I spend my days. It's not healthy,
Yeah.
So I would encourage more women to find more space in their schedule. Here's another thing that I'll tell you that's been a good awareness for me. If I could just, I don't know how much time we have, just 5 more minutes here. Things take the amount of time we give them. And what I mean by that is one of the reasons that people hear that I've had 9 companies and they think I have 9 companies all at the same time, which is not the case. I've had 9 companies over 35 years. At the most, I've run 4 at a time, sometimes 3. Right now I have 2 and I'm good with that. This is my retirement. Okay. But it's fun. The piece around the hours that you work and what you give yourself time to do is one of those disciplines that you can build a strong muscle around. And because of how I felt very disconnected from my family as a child, it was very important for me to be deeply connected with my children as they were growing up. So I wanted to drive them to school. I wanted to work my businesses while they were in class. And then I wanted to pick them up every day. And so I had to become more efficient at task that other people would take more time. And I also had this, and this is maybe where I was going kind of masculine, feminine, sometimes skill sets, saying no to things that were not in alignment with my goal, were not important to me. Being able to be strong in that defense of this bigger vision for my children's life, for my family, is my priority. And so things that would take away from that or were not in alignment with that, I had to learn to say no to. We're not now.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's helpful.
Learning to say no has been one of my big lessons. And I know a lot of the entrepreneurs, high achieving women and men, learning to say no and not chase shiny pennies and prioritize. And then I agree with you. Tasks take as long as you'll give them. I set my timer for things.
Yes.
Or you do too? Yes,
Clock.
exactly.
Person who, and I think this is a differentiator when people are looking for the distinctions of success, not necessarily my success, but like what are the things that have people be successful? You're talking about like professional athletes or being amazing at what you do. I think that the piece around being hyper protective of your time is one of the greatest distinctions that anyone can do. Because it's not really about your dollars and cents. You may have a certain amount of hours that you're working. If you're an employee and you're listening to this and you aspire to be an entrepreneur, you have a certain number of hours you're working, a certain number of hours you're sleeping, hopefully, and taking care of your body. But those hours in between, it's amazing when you start saying no or not now or no thank you to things that are not in alignment with your bigger vision, how much you can get done. I saw a quote once that said, spend your weekends doing the things that you need to do so that you can do what you want to do all week. Most people spend their hours and then they're like crashing on the weekend and they're just exhausted, right? If you actually spend a little bit more time on the weekends doing the things to line up to have your business, your systems, your structure, all the stuff you teach, Staci, that people can have in place so that they can have time freedom. That's how it happens. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen with a magic wand. It happens with practice. Practice, just like those divers, 37,000 times. Get better and better.
I love this. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your beautiful energy, for your vulnerability, If people want to connect with you in a philanthropic way or a business way, what are some of your projects you have going on that you're excited about?
Well, I think we offer education. We offer free education. We have tons of it online. We've been doing free gifts on Fridays for 8 years. So, go to limitlesswomen.com and start scrolling. There's so much good stuff there. We have a podcast as well for Limitless Women. There's lots of ways to find great things from us. And we're actively looking at how can we serve? How can we do more? The projects that we're working on right now are in 5 continents. And Scott and I are getting ready to celebrate our 25th anniversary. So we're going to New Zealand and Australia, and I'll let you know what we come up with, because that will be continent number 6. So I'm looking for nonprofits that are based in either New Zealand or Australia that empower specifically women and children. We're big fans and advocates around entrepreneurship. Obviously, that's changed our families' lives. Anything that have to do with healthcare, education. We like nonprofits that focus on clean water. But I think those are the places. So I would say anybody who's listening to this and has any ideas for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to me through the website. You can reach out to me through social, but I'm not always on social. So you probably do better to just catch me on the Limitless Women website.
We'll put that in the limitlesswomen.com. And it was such a pleasure having you. I hope that everyone listening, this really encourages you to build your business with discipline and understand the giving and receiving dynamic in your relationships in business and also your personal relationships, so that you can really have deep connection, belonging, and inspiration for everything that you do, so it energizes you instead of drains you.
Love that.
Thank you again.
Pleasure. I can't wait to see you and get my hands on you and hug you in person in just a few months.
Yes, I can't wait. It'll be so fun to be in a space with all kinds of women. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes too, if anyone wants to join us in person. And until then, stay rooted while you get your work done. Cheers, y'all.